Ashe. And Bella,
Mm.
like, how do you identify? Like, what is your like ethnicity, or do you identify along racial lines? Like, how do you identify where your parents from?
Yes, so I identify as a woman of the earth,
Hmm.
but here in America, I am a black woman.
Hmm.
My parents are both black from America. I'm born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. I currently live in Philadelphia, but I'm everywhere because I'm a woman of the earth, and that's what I truly
Give
believe about
thanks.
myself.
So
Hmm.
that means are your parents from the South?
Yep, they're from the
Okay.
South,
Okay.
South Carolina, and North
Okay.
Carolina, and Georgia.
Wow. Are they like Gullah Geechee, South Carolina, or something else?
So we are not sure. My
Okay.
my great grandmother, she came from South Carolina and met her husband in North Carolina in her journey, and then they moved to Detroit. And
Hmm.
they are very what we call tight-lipped folks who don't
Ooh,
talk a lot about the past and
right.
all the things. So we didn't get all the histories, and when we try to trace it back, it's sketchy. But
Yeah.
again, I feel connected to so many things, and that's why I say I'm a woman of the earth. It's a,
Yeah.
kind of.
Tell me a little bit about what woman of the earth means. Like, what does that mean as you characterize it?
Yeah, so I recognize that I am very fluid in my being, and I feel very connected to many things. And being a black person of the diaspora who has been displaced, it's hard to say, like, oh, well, I'm from this, and this is like my culture, roots, and tradition. And it's more easy for me to be in resonance to what feels aligned to me, and I can't categorize that to just being born in a specific place. And so that's why I say that I am a woman of the earth because there are many things in this life that feel resonant and true to my soul. That if I limited myself to just a certain identity, I feel like I would probably also limit myself from being able to connect to it.
That makes a lot of sense. When you were growing up, how would you have described yourself where religion is concerned?
Ooh. Well, I definitely grew up Christian. My mother is a minister. Uh, so I grew up in a very strict Christian household. Um, and I would have used that identifier out of obligation. I've always been a very curious child, though. I was always questioning and challenging, even in church. I would get in trouble a lot for the questions that I would pose. But yeah, so then I would say that I was curious, but by the way that I was born in the house that I grew up in, I identified as Christian
Yeah.
and
And
non-denominational Christian,
I
closer
was just
like
getting ready to
apostolic.
ask you
Hmm.
what kind of Christianity. So tell me about some of the beliefs that you may have really held growing up in that non-denominational Christian system. What were the things that you believed as a youth?
Well, um, I had a belief that uh, I needed I needed a God to save me. I had a belief that I was like inherently wrong in a lot of ways, mostly because I questioned a lot of things. So I used to get a lot of pushback. Um, I was always told that I was rebellious, um, and I feel like I lived under a lot of condemnation and just like a lot of I had to be a certain way, like just my natural way of being was not enough. And those things eventually were the foundation for a large part of my life that I had to do a lot of working through. But those were some of the things that I just really carried and really embody into my subconscious that belief like I wasn't enough, I was clean, I was a sinner, I wasn't righteous, and that I needed to be saved. And I lived in a lot of shame and unworthiness about just my natural disposition and my natural self.
Let's talk about that because I want you to make the distinction on where those messages were coming from. Maybe if there's a particular
Hmm.
examples or a particular person who's saying that, or you know, obviously church is part of the process, but we have so many different influencers aside from just church. So tell me about where these messages were coming from and in relation to what specifically.
Um, I think that the thing that made me take on this message the most was prayer, actually, because I remember like every night before bed, I would have to pray and I would have to ask God to forgive me for my sins. And so I would have to think about all these things that I had did wrong or these things that were wrong with me, in order to ask for forgiveness so that I could establish or reestablish connection to God. And so I think that that's the thing that I think about the most when people ask me, like, well, how did you get there? Or did you get in that space? And I was like, well, I used to have to identify like all the things that were wrong with me so I could tell God, so then that God could say, okay, I forgive you and I love you. And now you can pray and receive my goodness. Um, and then in addition to that, I think that because my mother was so steadfast and is so steadfast in her faith and in her belief, um, it was just perpetuated. Like, okay, well, you have to do these things. Like as a Christian, you need to make sure that you're not listening to secular music, you're not dancing to secular music, having desires that are not holy, or everything. Like all of these things are wrong. But it just seemed like all of these things were just naturally inside of me. Like I wanted to move my body. I felt, sentiments of arousal, or, I was curious and I had questions and I could be contrary, in asking those questions, right? Because I wanted to have a deeper understanding, and I believed in the universe and in the world and in science, and astrology seemed cool, and witches were cool. And so all of these things were, I had a curiosity about, and I thought they were cool, but they just seemed so contradictory to what I was being raised in. And then I think I also spent a good portion of my years exploring like my sexuality and my sexual preferences. And so, I had like this sexual fluidity going on. I remember telling my mom, and she was just like, "That's wrong. You're a sinner." Da, 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 da. And then I was also having, like trauma in my house, and things that I was experiencing in my family dynamic that also made me feel even more at odds of what I was being taught. So, like dealing with like sexual abuse. And that it was, like, well, now I'm dirty and I'm not clean, or even having a mother who could my mom was abusive, right? And so it's just like also navigating that as well, but then also seeing her as like the ultimate law. Like I definitely place a lot of energy and wanting to appease my mom and wanting to please her and wanting to please God. And so like thinking about just kind of like um, present, tangible influences, my mother and God were kind of really like wrapped into one for me. Like if I could please one or the other, then I was pleasing them both, So I definitely had like those narratives that I carried in my mind as well.
It's such a layered it's such a layered story,
Hmm.
and there's something that you've brought in that nobody else has brought in, that you're my eighth um discussion, and nobody has talked about
Shout out to the eight.
body.
Sorry,
Yes.
body. I'll talk about that. We'll get to
um yeah, nobody's talked about the body,
that.
in regards to religion, like how religion and the body and sexuality, like that element, um what did you have questions about? Like, what were these questions that you were asking where religion was concerned, the body was concerned, sexuality was concerned? What were the questions that people kept giving you hell about that they refused to answer? What were these
Yeah.
questions?
Well, my biggest question was always why? Oh, why? You know, so like in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Okay, well, like, what about these planets? Well, when did God create that? Or why did He just create us? Or why? Well, why we got to go to church? Well, why we got to pray like this? Or why? Like, I was the queen of why. And then the other part was I know the Bible, right? Growing up, I had to know scriptures. I had to read scriptures. I had to pray. So I would also be like, well, somebody say something to me and they'd be like, well, that's why you should read your Bible. And I'd come back with a verse and they'd be like, well, no. And I would just get in trouble. And I think that the trouble was people didn't always have answers to my questions. Um, but when it came to like sexuality and the body. So the for me, I think that my hypersexuality started a bit early, just because of some of the experiences that I had. And I became aware of my body. I became aware of sentiments and feelings in my body. And so in that I became, just curious about myself, and what I was feeling. And then there was also like a very big retribution against my body. Like I couldn't be present in my body for a ton of reasons. One, I had a large body, right? I'm a big woman. I'm a thick woman, a voluptuous woman that takes up space. And so, like there's all this like conversation about my body and having big thighs and big boobs and all of these, you know what I'm saying? So it's just like, okay, it's all this conversation happening around my body, which began to determine for me how I felt in my body, like my comfortability in my body, or like being young and people looking at me like in a way that I knew was inappropriate, but nobody would assign language to, or if I said something, I was just like, don't talk about that. And then also just like feeling, like I'm a black girl, so you hear music, you hear drums, you just want, you want to move. And I had like just a natural inclination to sensual movement, and it was nothing that I don't think I studied. I just, like even now, people are like, you just sexy, like you just like you don't walk, like you glide, So I just have like this way of being about me, and so when I would be expressive in that, I would get in trouble, like, and I think a lot of black women, black girls did, like you being fast, like you doing too much sit down, cover up, so on and so forth. And it's just like, well, why? Why can't I dance? Why can't I wear this? Why can't I look like that? Why does this person get to look at me? Why are you touching me? Like, like all of these things. Or why I gotta wear this? And so then that began to translate into language of like being uncouth, or like, like, or are you having sex, like you're in trouble, like. And it's like I'm not even doing anything on my own will at this time. Like, what about the people that's going against my free will? Why are they not in trouble? Like, you know what I'm saying? So it was just a lot of questions that I had that were not getting answers, or I wasn't being supported in that way.
Yeah, very, very, very detailed. Like everything that you're saying, I understand it. Like it feels like I'm kind of going through the process with you and really
Mhm.
understanding what you were thinking, experiencing, going through, feeling, etc. During all of this stuff that you're experiencing, who did you feel like was really in charge? Like who was in charge? Who was the authority and who was the spiritual authority? And if there was a dynamic with an authority and a spiritual authority, then how did you interact with these authorities where your own grievances were concerned? Like, how did you interact with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I actually just made like a very vulnerable voice note and I shared it with a few people. So for me, the center of my world and the ultimate authority in my life was my mom. And then after that, well, I mean, and next to that, God, I don't know how to explain it, but a lot of that was with my mom. And I was also very afraid of my mother growing up. I was recently writing, now I was recently sharing a writing with folks about how I used to hide from my mom. So, like on weekends, when I didn't have to go to school or I didn't have anywhere to go, I would stay in bed until I like physically could not stay in bed anymore. Like I would literally pee in a plant before I went downstairs to go to the bathroom so my mom wouldn't know that I was awake because I didn't feel like I had agency or a voice or freedom to be myself or to be free in the way that I wanted to. Like I would just hide. So there was no expression. After a while, I think I just became defeated in all of my question asking, and there was no real way for me to express or advocate for myself or advocate for my needs. And I would, I just wouldn't. I would just pray. Just like, well, if I pray enough, if I could become clean, God can like fix it, and then I'll just be like holy, or it'll go away, or something like that. But I didn't have like that space in my childhood, or even just as a young adult, where I felt like I could get the support and help that I needed.
Wow. That's a mouthful.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Five.
if yeah, if you could go back to that version of you, tell me what age this is happening or what age you're like in that space where you're like, this is not safe, that's not
Mm-hmm.
safe, I can't, there's nowhere to go. Like, what age is this happening?
Yeah, so this is most of my life, especially I would say it was especially after my grandmother passed away when I was 9.
Mm,
That was like
okay.
my favorite person in the whole
Oh
world.
my
So when
goodness.
she died, it was like, oh, well, who else do I have? And my dad, my mom and my dad divorced. So
Mm-hmm.
I would go see my dad every other weekend when, he would follow through. And then he remarried, so I had a stepmother.
Okay.
But for the most part, I felt like I didn't have that until I was an adult,
Okay.
until I just got out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of things that I held in my body. So I guess I'll just be open. I'll
Mm-hmm.
be quite vulnerable. Um, so one thing that I wrote about in that letter, I had a yeast infection from eighth grade until I was 16.
Mm-hmm.
So that was eighth grade is like
Oh
13.
my
So,
gosh.
and I did not feel safe to tell my mom because I was afraid that she was going to say that I was being sexually active, and I wasn't. And the only reason that the it came out about the yeast infection is because I was raped and I had to go get a rape kit done. And
Oh
during the
my
rape kit,
goodness.
the doctor was like, "You have a yeast infection," and I was like, "Oh, I don't know what that is. What?" And she was like, Have you been itching? I was like, yes, for years. Actually, I would take like long bath. Like
Wow.
it was bad. And so, yeah, I didn't have like where I could even talk about, things like that. Just like things that are happening in my body because I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel like it would be received well. It wouldn't be welcomed well. I was like, okay, I'll just deal with it. Like I'll just, figure something out. Um, and so it took all of that for me to take one pill to just clear it
Yeah.
all up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's just like, Wow, I wish that I would have had the space to handle that sooner.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I didn't feel like I had that space in my
Hmm.
life
Yeah.
where I could turn to people because I was mostly perceived as rebellious or just I just did what I wanted to do or I just wasn't righteous in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, first, thank you for being vulnerable or feeling, that this is a sacred and safe space to share because in my presence, it absolutely is.
Good thing.
It absolutely is. It's just, um, a conversation with sisters, a conversation that Black women we have to have these conversations. Like
Mhm.
we have to have them. And thank you for being willing to show up, and being open. And I am absolutely so sorry that that happened to you. Like I I don't even know that there are words that
Mhm.
I have that could really express how completely unacceptable that is. And it sounds like you've done some healing work to be able to even voice it and say it, out loud. Um, but I'm 100% sure that there's going to be someone who watches this or hears this on a
Mhm.
podcast and says it's
Yeah.
me too, you know.
Yeah.
So thank you for being willing to talk about that.
Yeah.
Um, when you talk about the loss of your grandmother, this is the
Mm.
first time she's really entered the conversation. So please say her name so we can
Yes. My
acknowledge
beloved,
her.
my beloved Yvonne Henrietta LeGrand Boy, aka Bonnie, Grandma Bonnie. That's what we call her.
Okay.
And I just to your last point, though, I have done a tremendous amount of
Mm,
work and ongoing. I would say ongoing, because what I've also have just my journey into acceptance is, like, there is a part of me that just you would wish, oh, I wish my mom was different. I wish that, she just hugged me. I could just go to her. And, like you see some really beautiful mother daughter bonds, and it's like, I don't have that. But I think that the thing that I have come to accept and to find just my space of gratitude in is that my mom was the best teacher for me. And had she not been the way that she had been, I would not be the woman that I am. And I love who I am. In spite of all the things that I've experienced, and I don't think that that makes them okay. They are not absolved. But whatever conversation was had with my higher self, my Ori, my destiny, that said, hey, you got to come here and you got to become this woman and you got to learn these lessons through these situations to restore yourself to higher divinity and to your highest destiny. That's what I had to go through. And I recognize also in my mother she is only trying to perpetuate what she feel has saved her, and that is her trying to give me a gift from the best of her ability, and she just doesn't have the capacity or space to accept anything outside of that. And so I am accepting that that is okay, um, and I am accepting what I cannot change and embracing that I get to be in charge of my own destiny. And so while those things were difficult, they taught me a lot, and they taught me a lot about my own capacity for self reliance and resilience. And they also taught me how to find God for myself. So I just wanted to say that because I always am cautious not to just paint like I'm not a victim. um, and my mother isn't evil. She just is, because I really am breaking free in my journey from those binaries of good and bad. Because if I lean into those binaries, then I am perpetuating the same oppression that oppressed me, right? Like that's bad or that's good. And that's what I lived under my whole life. Like I need to be good so that I wouldn't be bad. And so, having to really break up with that language so that I could live a full life, a full and fluid life. Back to my beloved grandmother,
Wait,
who was
wait. We got time for
okay,
grandma. We got time for
okay.
grandma Bunny. So before we talk about grandma, I want to acknowledge that speaking about, I mean, just the way that you've talked and the way that you've shown up today, really, it's felt like you were just speaking from the heart. It feels like you're just speaking your truth.
Mhm.
And I think that there is something that we do um more often than not, based off of the society that we were raised in, where we have to thinking about our trauma. We have to thinking about um like our thoughts. Like we think about the thoughts that we're thinking.
Mhm.
And oftentimes it's not necessary.
Mhm.
Like it's okay to say this happened and it was bad.
Mhm.
If that's how you sincerely feel,
Mhm.
if you feel like this shouldn't have happened, or I don't like that.
Mhm.
Um those things are all okay.
Mhm.
There's and a big reason why I say that is because um it's not your job to clean up the
Mhm.
truth.
Mhm.
You were a young child, young woman experiencing life as life was handed and life was given and life was offered. And
Mhm.
these are the things that it gave and it offered and that you were
Mhm.
handed. You can literally just write a timeline. We can put the context clues together. Even after you've said all that, I still know this was wrong.
Yeah.
And part of us as spiritually embodied beings also understands that human beings are human beings and human beings make mistakes.
Mhm.
And to acknowledge that to err is human, that's also part of the process.
Mhm.
It's also part of it. It's not, you know, and I have a daughter. It's crazy because she's like 20 something years old and I'm 20 something years old. So I don't know how that happened. But with my own daughter, I end up talking to her often
Mhm.
about like the things I felt like I did wrong, the things
Mhm.
that I felt like I owe her an apology about. And my daughter has had to check me and be like, "Mom, you're good." You're like,
Mhm.
I wasn't even thinking about that. Like, I just, Mom, calm down. But for me to acknowledge that I made an error, that if I had it to
Mhm.
do all over again, I wouldn't have done that. I would have done differently. That's not wrong. It's okay
Yeah.
to say that. Even if she doesn't remember it, even if it's okay for her, it wasn't okay for me as a parent.
Mhm.
My awareness has brought me thus far where I can look back and say, "Oh, I messed up. Oh, that wasn't okay." And
Mhm.
it's acceptable. It's still a green check mark. It's still a blue
Mhm.
verified check mark. So be in that awareness as well that as you state your truth, as you tell your story, there's no need for you to do a cleanup job in 2026 about what's right and what's wrong. Like what happened happened.
Mhm.
Nobody can know there's no amount of money you can pay me to stand in a court of law and say, Your Honor, this is what happened with Bella as she reported it, and I think it's okay because she said it's okay. It still won't
Mhm.
be okay.
Mhm.
That's all I'm saying. If you say, God is queen, I'm gonna pay you 5 million, I'm gonna pay you five. It doesn't, we're not doing that. Okay.
I
So I
received
want you
that.
to just be in the space of I'm just here to tell my story. And I know that can be a little nerve-wracking because it even in my book, I have a memoir, my book, Goddess Awakening, Rise of the Divine Feminine. And as I was writing that book, I was like, whew, they gonna read this book. And they gonna know what I said. Like there was a lot of stuff that I was writing and just, I was in a 7 day water fast that last like, chapter of the book and just writing a few chapters. I was in the Sacred Women program. I think I was in Mesh Connect in that gateway. And I was there writing those last chapters, water fasting. So that means I had nothing but the truth, okay,
Mm-hmm.
was inside. And I was scared because I was like, what if they listen? What if they read it? What if these things are exposed? And part of the wisdom that has sat in my body, sat in my soul, sat in my mind, sat in my divine experience has always reminded me that you will never be judged for telling the truth. You're not
Mm-hmm.
going to be judged for the truth. You have to tell your truth as it is,
Mm-hmm.
and any deduction that people make from that truth is theirs to make. What happens after you tell the truth, that you can't control that. But do your part and just show up and feel free to show up, because I guarantee you my mama ain't picked up that book, my aunties ain't picked up the and not a single one of the people that I had heart palpitations about reading the chapters have read any of that. That book
Mm-hmm.
has been placed in the hands of those who were meant to read those stories, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Give
I
thanks
received
and
that.
praise.
I received
Yeah.
that gift. Thank you.
Yeah. Give.
I definitely, yeah, there's definitely a part of me that's like, you know, and, but I do think that that's true, right? And just being able to state that and just like, yeah, this is what happened. And that's what I did in a voice recording that I shared with some folks. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
this is what happened. And then it was
Yeah.
just mic drop.
Right.
And
Right.
that's
And I'm not
it.
going to explain. I will not be explaining any further.
Yeah. That's very true. And I definitely recognized I had a few needs that I needed to fulfill when I went back. And one was really truly about acceptance, because I feel like for so long
Mm.
I sat, you did, this happened.
Yeah.
Ah, and it was
Yeah.
just like, okay, it happened.
Yeah.
And so in the present moment, how will you progress and move
Right.
forward
Yeah.
with what
Mm-hmm.
and how will you also find your peace?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that, a part of that is for the acceptance and for the peace. And then a part of it was like, that's still my mama, y'all.
Right. Right.
That's still my
Right.
mama.
Right.
So
Right.
and that's real. And I'm existing in both. But I appreciate
Yeah.
that gift because I do need that reminder.
Yeah.
Be- because the child in me also wanted to clean up and fix
Yeah.
everything. Right?
Yes.
It's like,
I
it's
can hear
okay.
her on maintenance. I'm like, put that mop down, girl.
You saw her. She was, hey.
Like, is that the vacuum? What are you doing? That's
Why are you dusting?
not even your mess.
You on a podcast?
Mm-mm.
Put it out.
Put it down right now. You're not going to bring it on this podcast. I can hear the vacuum. Okay.
Give thanks. Give thanks. I
So,
turned it. I'm
yes,
plugging
give thanks and praise. Now, tell me about grandma. Tell me about who she was, what she believed, and what you all's relationship was like.
No, my grandmother. That was my heart and my soul. Okay.
Mhm.
My grandma was that girl. She used to run the numbers. She was a booster.
Oh,
My grandma was listen. My grandma was the antithesis to everything my mom believed in. Okay. My
yes.
grandma. She was amazing. She used to cook. She used to cook, and she cooked good. People would come over. Your grandma cook. Where's she cut? No, she cooked.
Oh.
People come like, and she would feed everybody. So my grandma was a
Hmm.
very, very giving person. And I used to just be under her. She had
Hmm.
heart issues. Her life. She had rheumatic fever when she was little.
Mm.
And then as a result, she just, continued with like heart issues and things like that. So she was like on dialysis. Like I remember her being on dialysis. I was little, and I would go to dialysis with her, and I would eat ice because she would eat ice because that, managed her water intake. And I would go with her to run the numbers. And my auntie Brenda, which was her best friend, I would be with her when I couldn't be with my grandma, and she ran the numbers too. And my grandma, she used to boost clothes, and then she would sell them to a boutique, and I would be there. I would just be everywhere. Like I would just be, in the mix of my grandma. And she died when I was 9 years old, but she was an amazing woman, um, because I just felt loved. Like I just felt like she loved me, and that she believed in me, and that I was perfect and complete in her sight. And so when she died, I was heartbroken because I felt like I didn't have that, um, anymore, and that was the hardest death of my life. So much so that I was shut down for about 20 years of my life. Until I was 29. I didn't cry for anything. And I remember I went to this she's my therapist. I call her my therapist, but she's a therapist, life coach, medium, spiritualist. And I don't know how I found her, but I think that she's always been a part of my life because my aunt reminded me one day. She's like, "You remember your imaginary friend Kathy?" When I was little, she said I used to have this imaginary, and I was like, "I don't know who that is," but I used to have her, and I used to always talk to her and tell her everything. And so somebody introduced me to this woman named Kathy, who became, and it was so funny. So I go to her for our first session. She was like, "You smell like cigarettes." And I'm looking at this. Like, first of all, I didn't want to be there. I was like, "I don't even do therapy, miss." She's like, "You smell like cigarettes," and I was like, "I don't smoke cigarettes." She's like, "Well, I don't deal with clients who smoke cigarettes." So, and I was like, "Well, I don't smoke cigarettes, but my grandmother used to smoke cigarettes." And something in her eyes like flickered. She's like, "Your grandma's here." And then next thing you know, I'm crying for like 45 minutes, just on
Oh,
just
just like that.
just like that. And so I remember maybe like a year before this, I had started like my little ancestral altar. And I had a picture of my grandma. My grandma was sexy too, okay? I wish I had the picture. Sometimes I'll be having a picture in my notebook, okay? Because my
Okay,
grandma, I
let's
had this
see.
picture.
Let's see,
Oh my gosh.
Grandma.
I might not have it. But she had this picture. She's sitting on a chair and she naked. She's sitting on the chair with her leg crossed up like this. She like that.
Okay.
So, I had that picture on the altar because I said, because that's my grandma, because she was that girl,
Okay.
okay? And so I had my other grandma, and I didn't know, again, my family is pretty, tight lipped. And so, and also, you asked about your family. And my mom just like, no, I'm not doing it. So, I just had like these two pictures. And I had started it on the birthday of my other grandmother, my grandma
Mhm.
Lola. And I loved her too, but, me and Grandma Bonnie we was something special.
Yeah.
And so, every now and then I just go talk, something light because I was just getting into that. And so after that conversation, she was like, "You gonna go and you gonna talk to your mom?" She said, "Write her a letter." So I'm like, "All right, but." I go home, and at this point, I'm living in Philly, and my mom had moved to Philly because I just had my daughter. Well, my daughter was like 2 when my mom came to Philly, but I was like finishing school, and I became a teacher. Like, I had a lot going on, so my mom had
Mhm.
came to help support my daughter, and
Mhm.
so I'm in there writing my letter to my grandma. And while I'm writing the letter, my mom called me. She go, "Ariel, come here." And so I'm like, "Okay." So I get it. She's like, "I'm gonna give you this stuff." Girl, she put out my grandma wallet. She put out her belt. And so I'm saying, I'm trying not to cry because I'm about to cry now just thinking about it. I'm trying not to cry because I'm like, if I start crying, I'd explain to her why I'm crying. We already been arguing because she like, what's these dead folks doing on your wall with candles and shit? Like, so, so she give me that. And so I just run back in my room, but I'm just like, "Ah." She's like, "I just want you to
Oh.
have that. I think your grandma would want you to have that." I said, "You don't even know I'm sitting here writing this letter to my grandma after this whole thing, yesterday." And I had a lot of work to do though around my grandma because when she died, I just felt like my heart just closed. My heart was just broken. It was just I never thought that I could experience anything like that. And I remember when my grandmother died, I remember I remember telling my mom, I was like, "Yeah, I'm telling my grandma, like da da da." My mom was like, "You can't talk to your grandma. Your grandma dead. She can hear you." And so I remember being like, "Huh?" And so she's like, "Yeah, you better just pray." And I was just like, God, could you tell my grandma? So that's how I used to talk to my grandma. Like, God, you got so my grandma. Because that was, I just felt like I would never. I knew my grandma was sick, but I just didn't think like she was gonna die. I remember even when
Mhm.
before she died, she was like, I want to be buried in my St. John suit, and I want y'all to put this with. Like my grandma was like that. Like she was like, and these shoes on, and I want this purse, and this lipstick. And I was just remember like, but you're not about to die. And I remember
Mhm.
being there. She died, and my cousin was like, your grandma died, and I just like punched him like right in the stomach, like. Grandma died. And then they was carrying her. I was like, oh my god, my grandma died.
Oh my
So
goodness.
it took me. I was like just like really closed after that. Um, and then I started the altar. Then I had that experience with my therapist medium. And then when I was writing that letter, and then my mom just called me in there to give me that stuff, and I was like, oh, all right, well, now we cooking.
Yeah. We're
we on that.
outside now.
Oh yeah, we on the right
Yeah.
track.
Yeah.
And so then I just, all the stuff that I needed to tell her that I didn't tell her, and then also, having to let her die and
Mm.
like let her soul go on and just be like, I'm okay. Like I'm okay now. Like I know that you didn't abandon me or forsake me. Like it was just a part of the journey, and
Yeah.
it hurt. But I had to do a lot of talking and writing and releasing. And now my girl, she got her own little section. She got VIP on the like,
Clearly.
both
Her
of my
St.
grandmas
John's
do, but
suit.
okay, for real, because that was my girl. That was her.
Now
But
let me ask you, you said you already had your ancestral altar up. Let's talk a little bit. We have about 10 minutes.
oh,
But let's talk about yes, let's talk about you actually like learning about altars and like getting to the point where you created your own altar. Like last time I checked, you was a Christian.
yes.
When did you become an altar building,
Mhm.
Bella? Like,
Oh wow.
yeah.
Where did that begin? So
Hmm.
let's see. So yes, I continued as a Christian. I went to college, tried not to be a Christian, then I joined gospel choir, and then but I realized I'm very spiritual. I've always been very spiritual.
Hmm.
Um, and so again, I grew up non-denominational, but like apostolic, like laying hands, speaking in tongues, like that's the type of church background I came from. And so I remember one day I was laying in bed, I was visiting my dad. I was like 27,
Hmm.
something like
Hmm.
that. And so I was just thinking about like my hands and like energy in my hands. And so something was like, look up energy healing. I was like, I've never heard of that. And I came across Reiki. So I started I was like, okay, I'm going to go learn Reiki. And I'm going to give you the abridged version because I know that we had time. But
Yeah.
so yeah, I went to go learn Reiki. And when I was learning Reiki, I would get all these visitations from spirits. And so I thought it was interesting because when I was younger, also, there were always spirits around me to the point where I did not sleep well at night as a child. I didn't start
Mm.
sleeping well until I was about 14. And so I was just like, I can't do this. I was like, I don't know what y'all want. My mom, she'd just say, go pray, say the Our Father,
Wow.
say your prayers. And I was just like, okay. And then when I started doing Reiki, all these spirits would just like came back. Like my grandma was there, like all, and that's what made me start the altar. 'Cause I was like, oh,
Hmm.
hey grandma, like what I do with everybody? Let me just just try something. I was just out here fending for myself. And so that kind of brought me into relationship with the altar, and then
Hmm.
recognizing like spirits have needs because I would be doing
Hmm.
Reiki sessions for people, and then they spirits would like pull up, and I'm like, I'm seeing this person with da 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 da, and I was like, well, you need to go light them a candle and do this,
Hmm.
and did they like this? Because and so like that was kind of like my thing, but I still hadn't really had enough acceptance in my heart about my dead folks to like
Hmm.
hear ask. clearly from them until I got to my therapist at the time.
Mhm.
So that's how I had started the beginning part of my ancestral journey. Um, and then my mother, because she's still a spiritual woman, Christian, but I remember she had prophesied to me. She was like, "I see you leaving Christianity, and you're gonna denounce Jesus." She was very upset, and at the time, I was still pretty Christian, even like
Right.
with all the stuff that was going on. I was still like Christian-esque. I was going to church, and I was like, "Okay, girl, I know what you're talking about." And then like a year later, I had went to the Roots picnic, and
Mhm.
this group, Ibeji, was there. I don't know if you heard of Ibeji, the Cuban singing group. Well, anyway,
Mm.
they sing to Orishas, and so I
Okay.
didn't know that at the time. But I'm like, oh, this is great music. I get there at home and they have this song so Oya, and I was like, oh, this is just such a good song. And I'm like, who the hell is Oya? Who's Oya? And so I'm like, I Google it. I was like, oh, that sounds cool, you know. And so I remember being like, oh, I feel like I'm going through a lot of transformations in my life. Let me just, light a candle. And thank you for this song and whatever. And I was dating this guy, and he was like, Bella, let's go to Cuba. And I was like, Cuba? All right, let's go to Cuba. So I go to Cuba. I was like, oh, while we there, I heard about like this Oya. I would like to meet a Babalao or Santero. I'm there. And so I was like, we don't know how we're gonna do that because in Cuba you can't contact anybody for real, for real. And so we happened to go on a bike tour. So in Cuba they are so kind. We waited 3 hours for this lady, this Brazilian Santera, to show up on our bike tour. And so she gets there and she's in all white and she got her hair red. She's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Emily, I had to whatever, whatever." I was like, "Okay, whatever." And so we talking, and so she has like taboos. So you get, if you're into religion, you have certain things you can't do. So we had to like honor certain taboos for her. And so we're talking, and so I was like, "Oh," I was like, "I'm curious about this tradition. It's hard to really hear about it here where where I'm from. I'm not a connection." And she's like, "Oh, I'll introduce you to a Babalao." So she gives me this Babalao's number. I get back to our room. I call the Babalao. He and his wife invite me and my friend over for lunch. He's an initiate to Oya. And he's like, oh, so I'm like, oh my goodness, like this just feels, like so taboo. And we're there with them for like 6 hours. But the people in Cuba are beautiful like that. Like they made us this lunch. They don't even know us. So they made us like this big, beautiful lunch. And we go and like he does a prayer, and, whatever. We just, talk and we meet his kids and I go back. He's like, if you're interested, I would be your godparent. I was like, well, I don't really know. I would rather do it, somewhere that I'm close to. I get back to Philly and that summer I have a friend. He calls me and this is a different friend. He's like, hey Bella, I think you would want to go to this baptism with me. And I'm like, a baptism? He's like, yeah, I think you would like it. And I'm like, this is 20, what is this, 2019, 2020, somewhere in there, 2019, right before the pandemic. Maybe soon, I don't know. Anyways, he's like, I think you would like it. And I was like, a baptism? He's like, yeah. So I'm like, all right, whatever. So I go, and it's a leke ceremony, someone receiving their lekes. And so I'm like, oh, well, hi, everybody. And so, I kind of tell them, my journey, my interests. And then that ended up becoming my home Elay. 3 years later, I initiate into the practice. But, I thought that it was interesting because, my mom tells me, I'm like, what are you talking about? Then I go to this concert, I hear this song, and then I'm dating a guy, he's like, let's go to Cuba. And then I get more exposure and openness to it, and then I come back, and then the guy who invited me to the ceremony, he takes me to the ceremony. He never goes back to the place. They're like, "What happened to your friend that brought you here?" And I'm like he might pop around every now and then. I was like, he just had to drop me off here. Like he just needs to get me, to this place. And so like that was my turning point into ATR, and I really struggled with it because I had all this conditioning about, like right and wrong, and like this is demonic. But fortunately, every head finds its house, right? And so I had a lot of God brothers and sisters who also had similar journeys who also were, just very supportive of me and helping me to understand like some of the parallels and just also things to bring my soul at ease. But I would also get a lot of omen and affirmation from the ancestors, from my spirit guides, that really, just supported me on the journey. And then I found peace. I just feel at peace. Like I'm happy with who I am, and I understand the intricacies of having a personal destiny. And yeah,
Thank you for that. Now it feels like a full circle moment, like just starting from where you started and then getting to the part where you said, I'm happy, you know.
yeah.
It's definitely the whole thing. We have like about a minute left. I'm just curious to the person who's listening who started where you started, in terms of like that that place of judgment and condemnation and criticism and can't do anything right and rebellious and all those things, to that person who started there but hasn't found they're happy yet and still has a lot of questions, um what would you say to them?
I would say to them to trust your spirit, to trust your essence, and
Mm-hmm.
to pursue it. Pursue pursue what you know to be innately true for you.
Mm-hmm.
And don't stop. Let's continue to choose yourself over and over and over again, despite what's being told to you, and to just recognize that those things are socializations and things that work for other people on their destiny, but
Mm-hmm.
only what's for you is going to work for you. And when you find that, you will find your peace.
Give thanks. Give thanks. Thank you, Bella, for coming on today.
Thank you. I'm so
Being
grateful.
lucky number 8.
Yeah. Lucky number
Yep.
8. That's my
So
number. That's
I
my
am
lucky
going to make sure I do a nice little write-up in the description for this particular episode,
Okay.
so that people can feel comfortable to ask any questions that they may have, as a follow-up. And
Yeah.
just thank you for being part of this project and helping it to come to life, because it wouldn't be alive without you.
Thank you. And thanks for
Thank
extending
you.
the invitation to us all to be here. So I'm grateful.
For sure. For sure. So I will see you on the next discussion. All of you out there listening, I will see you on the next discussion. All